Hey, Kyle, it's Ani calling.
How are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm well. I'm binary. Yay! What a great record.
Yay. Oh, cool. Binary, yay.
Yeah, that's a way to
That's
say.
my favorite review.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's you can put that on your press sheet right there.
Yeah,
Binary. Yay!
perfect.
Kyle Meredith. Is this? I don't know if you keep count. Is this album 19 or 20? Because I've seen it both ways, and one seems like a big
No.
milestone.
Oh, really? Because
Yeah.
somebody said 21 to me the other
Oh,
day.
see?
So obviously counting is not for the artistic, the
None of
creative.
us.
Exactly. I don't know. I'm going to go with 20. I like the round number vibe.
All right, and we can keep saying 20 until it's not, if we need
Until
to.
it's true, because it's the age of say it and it is true.
Right. I guess the way to start then is kind of looking back at that last album, because it almost seemed like you were afforded, I don't know, a quick breather with the last record as far as tackling things, and there was some things on there, but the bigger picture stuff, and maybe now it was time to get back, I don't know, on the warpath. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Yes, I think so. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the album before this one came, over the span of a baby coming into the world and then having an infant in my life. So that's just naturally an inward looking time. You're just grappling with, wiping butts and nursing and all of that stuff. And then you come back out into the world, the ebb and flow of life.
Right. And there's so many targets for subject matter at this point. I mean, do you let them
Really?
come to you, or do you go hunting and start chiseling? Like, how do you?
I mean, I
yeah.
guess I'm blessed with like an overactive spleen. I don't know if blessed is the word, but I'll tell you, every Eastern medicine, healer person that I've ever seen, like Chinese doctor, the first thing you do is stick out your tongue, and the second thing that happens is they say, "Oh, you don't sleep. You worry. Your spleen, poo, pow." I'm like, yep, that's me. So, things just affect me, and many of them are, outside of my personal sphere. I've never really been able to draw clear lines, between my personal life and the life of my society. It seems like I'm always perilously in step, right up to and including this recent, implosion. Everything is upside down. Nobody knows what happens next. And the time is now to talk, to address, to act.
Yeah, it's still. I know a lot of these songs were, they were written before the election, which seems to be the case with a lot of artists. So, I mean, at that point, it's not like the conversations weren't already there. They just hadn't become as heightened as they are now once the record is out. I mean, isn't it one of those things where you're writing these songs, the election hasn't happened, so you're pulling off campaign rhetoric and just the issues of the day, which there were more than enough, things to tackle. But suddenly it all does happen, and this album, unfortunately, has to make even more sense.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, a song like Play God, like you say, these issues are always happening, like reproductive freedom for women. Hello, today? How about tomorrow? How about, so I write this kind of anthemic song about reproductive freedom as a civil right, which is how I see it. And I think I'm under the impression that this song will be coming out in the first year of, our first female president, our first female in the Oval Office. And I'm thinking, all right, now is the time we're going to write this amendment to the Constitution. We're going to, I've actually been calling a bunch of my genius feminist lawyer friends, and we're trying to get a coalition together to start forming the language, and let's try to articulate this vision of what we mean when we say reproductive freedom is a civil right. And let's write this amendment, and let's talk about it. Maybe somebody in the Oval Office who can talk about it in the first person is all the momentum we're going to need. And then lo and behold, actually, like you say, maybe all of this work needs to be done even more now, of course, because a crisis situation.
You just never get the chance. I say that last album was a chance to breathe, but you just never really get the chance to breathe.
Right. I mean, yeah, in this world, right, you have to take your chance to breathe and hope that when you're done breathing, the world you love still exists.
Right. And I don't know, like the way you talk about this it really leads into that next thought I had, because it's one thing to talk about the big issues, but when you're a songwriter, you also want to make it personal to the listener and to you, I guess, to make it effective. And that's what I go after, reproductive rights, it's the topic we're on, but even for the other things, like to grab those issues that are personal to you and not just the big thoughts. How important is that for you as a songwriter?
Well, I think it's super important, for art to connect, that it be coming from someplace very deep, which is to say, and I think it's in that super deep place that you connect with the universe outside yourself, that you tap into, the one love, the one consciousness that there is. So, like, it's funny, I get described or introduced. I was just in New York doing a lot of stuff and somebody introduced me on stage again the other night, and they talk about, often it's the way people describe my politics and my work and my art. They notice the feminism, they notice the queer politics. That always gets brought up. Entrepreneur is a word that haunts me and follows me around. I still don't get that one. And oftentimes it comes before activist in the list of what I am, which just makes me crazy. But nobody ever says criminal justice, which has been such a huge, it's factored into my songs, it's factored into my activist life hugely. But because it doesn't fit that kind of stereotype of me, it goes unnoticed. But criminal justice is something that I've been made aware of very early on, because my manager was a criminal defense lawyer before he was my manager, and all of his friends and all of the community of the anti-death penalty and prisoners' rights stuff. And on this new record, there's a song, Terrifying Sight, which is very much about that, about the criminal injustice system in our country and mass incarceration. And it's also very personal because, well, I have a friend now who was given a life without parole sentence at the age of 19. I met him through this record that I've been working on for years called the Prison Music Project, which is going to come out later this year. And it's all songs written by dudes in prison, most of them lifers. Mm-hmm. And the one that I sang on the record is by this fella, Spoon Jackson, and he's become my pen pal, and we talk on the phone all the time. And he's been living in a cage for 39 years for a murder he committed when he was 19. But even guilty as he was of the crime, he's a completely transformed human being. He has paid his debt to society many times over. He's a peaceful, very thoughtful, beautiful human being now with no recourse for mercy. It's just, and it, like we're talking about, very personally, directly constricts my heart to have him as a friend and to just feel what it must be like to be him. Right. And living in a cage, and there's no one will recognize your humanity or your need to be free now, after having evolved and really rehabilitated, which is supposedly the idea of prison. Yeah. So anyway, it's like you gotta care about things and take them into yourself and live them and feel them with people, and then you can write about them that way. Yeah, I didn't know that part of the story, and you're right. I mean, as soon as you said that, that's exact same thing that I thought. It's like you put them in there, and everyone says to rehabilitate them, but they don't ever want to see them again. And even the ones that aren't proven guilty or whatever. I mean, we heard a few things about a few years ago. Was the Memphis 3? Was it Memphis 3 or Memphis 5? Whatever it was. But the kids who and they end up all getting out because of one of these compilations.
one of these compilations
right.
shed the light on it and suddenly, puts the conversation. I know there's so many people that don't get that opportunity, that don't get the spotlight to come their way. So.
I know, to think about it. Yeah, one of the organizations I'm involved with is the Innocence Project, which has a New Orleans chapter down here where I live. And it's amazing how many innocent men are in prison, or on death row, or, get executed. Mm-hmm. It's an imperfect system, which is one of the major reasons why I think capital punishment is a crime and should be abolished. Because, our government literally executes innocent men just because people would rather have somebody go down for a crime than, admit that, no, we couldn't find the guy. So you just, you find another guy. And, it's very humbling. It's very humbling once you really start going into the world of prison and criminal justice. And boy, it makes me look in the mirror and go, don't you ever complain ever again.
Right. Well, I know you've been thanked many, many times for, your activism and everything that goes along with that. But, in moments like this, I'll thank you again for putting that spotlight on things like this. So,
yeah.
And I'll briefly switch gears here to also bring up the music, because the play on this record is outstanding. The musicianship.
Yeah, cool.
And I noticed that it feels like there is a bit, your environment. New Orleans did make it onto this record, especially when you drop a name like Neville into the guest list. Like, how could it not?
Really.
Did you
Can't
want it
go
to?
Wrong with it.
Yeah. Did you want it to sound like a bit more New Orleans this time around?
None of what I do these days is really calculated. Mm-hmm. I feel like I've grown beyond that. I just follow. I just, there's somebody, the muse drops the breadcrumbs or something, and I just follow them. And I have no idea. I used to sort of come to an album with a plan or an idea, and after 20 records, or 19 or 21 or whatever, I realized, that's just silly, because the process and the moment and the interactions overwhelm any kind of plan, as they should, and they have a plan all of their own. So, I guess really just what happened is, my drummer of these last bunch of years now is Terrence Higgins. He's born and bred in New Orleans, and, it's in his DNA, the sort of the rhythms of this place, they come out, of him, fully formed. And, and Ivan Neville is somebody that I've been playing more and more with the last few years. I think, a bunch of years ago, I called him up to just, overdub on some stuff I was working on. And it, my jaw just drops every time he plays. I actually roped him into doing a little tour with me last year, and there's just he just brings the spirit every time. He's just such a startlingly deep musician. So, this time out, I had him in at the bed track sessions. I'm like, give me a 3-day window. I want to make a record with you, So yeah. Ivan and Terrence are, right there along with Todd Sickafoose as the sort of the beds of this record. So that's 2/3 New Orleans right there.
Mm-hmm. And it does. The guest list is fantastic, and it makes for a really, really good record. I'll go ahead and say again, yay binary. So it's
yeah, it's cool. I'm pretty yay about it myself. I mean, you can't go wrong. I mean, that's my oblique strategy worked for me, at least. Inviting all these killer musicians and elevated spirits into the party with me on this record. It's like, how could I not love it too?
Right.
I've discovered the way to love my own record.
Have everybody else come on it.
Invite your friends. Right. Yeah.
I think that's a motto for life in general. So.
Yeah, amen.
Invite your friends. All right, Ani, it's so great to talk to you again. Well, hopefully we'll see you around these parts in Louisville eventually. But if not, have a great summer.
Oh, Kyle, thanks. So nice to talk to you too.
All right, I'll see you. Take care.
All right.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.